One of the most common questions I get asked today is BMW's M340d or the M340i, so diesel or petrol. I honestly don't think there's a right or wrong answer to either of those cars. It really comes down to your individual requirements. What I can say is I've lived with this M340d Touring in gorgeous tanzanite blue. Not that you could tell exactly what colour it is today because it's covered in so much winter grime. And I've absolutely loved my week with this car. It really is a car that does everything. And I think whether it's M340i or D, especially in this touring variant, it's pretty much all the package that anyone could ever want for about £50,000 here in the UK. Let's take it out for a drive and talk about my experiences with this car in the week that I've had it. And hopefully that can help make your mind up whether you need a D or an I. Missed my first drive video on one of these M340d Tourings, check it out. There'll be a link up here somewhere. I actually take that car out onto a private handling circuit and test out its claim 0 to 62 figure and test out some of its handling capabilities. It feels fundamentally like a rear wheel driven car, but when you're completely running out of grip and traction, it sends power to the front axle. So it's a really nicely balanced setup and it feels like it's got proper BMW DNA. I have to be honest, I haven't actually driven an M340i for about 6 months now, but I did recently drive the brilliant M340i, and that shares the same B58 3-litre straight 6 turbocharged petrol engine. And comparing performance and usability of both motors, well, they actually produce very similar feelings. This car has undoubtedly a lot more torque. You're always lower in the rev range, so instead of in the B58 you're sort of between, let's say, 2.5 and 5,000 RPM for daily driving. In this car you're more so between 1500 RPM and about 2.5 or 3,000, literally up to 3,000. It's just mighty in this car and far more impressive than the petrol equivalent. But where it really does lose out over the 340i or the 440i is up above 3,000 or 3,500 RPM. This kind of runs out of puff at about 4, whereas the B58 really gets going at 4, and that's where all of the power and a lot of the torque in fact is. So there's no denying that although this in application actually seems to do a better job at giving you more power and torque low down, in terms of drivability, the B58 petrol equivalent is ultimately more fun, and that's before you factor in the straight 6 petrol soundtrack. Although this one in sports actually sounds pretty good. I don't know how much of that's being piped around the cabin, but it doesn't sound too bad for a diesel. A couple of months ago I was talking to BMW UK about the potential of getting a long-termer for the winter months. Now they suggested potentially a 4 Series because that's a new model and something that they're pushing at the moment. But after having this car and experiencing some amazing cars throughout this year, if I was given the option between the two manufacturers that I do a lot of work with, so Audi and BMW, this is the car that I would choose. This, as a daily, as a winter weapon, is just unflappable. But literally, I absolutely love this car. I've only had it a week and I really don't want it to go back tomorrow morning because I've just enjoyed every second of my time with it. It's just been absolutely brilliant. Yes, I'm not the biggest fan of the black wheels on it, and it doesn't have the best tyres. It has some kind of Bridgestone run flat, horrible things. But unlike the M340i, where the ride was quite a lot stiffer and those Bridgestone run flat tyres really suffered as a result. It made them feel worse, and it just made the handling almost unacceptable in damp, cold weather like this. Because this car's set up a lot softer, especially when you're in comfort. Just a reminder, the M340i and 340d come standard with adaptive suspension. When you knock it back into comfort and into drive, it becomes so smooth down a road like this, and that makes a massive difference when you're looking at something as your daily tool, as a car that will do everything. You know, this massive load lugging ability. I love the fact that when you've got the seats up, you've got 500 litres of boot space, and when they're down, you've got 1500 litres back there. I love the little window that opens as part of the tailgate, so you can load things in or take things out of the boot without opening the entire tailgate. There's just so many practicalities that make this car brilliant, let alone the fact that you could seat 4 adults in here in absolute comfort. It's lovely bright in here. It's a nice place to be, especially when the sun's out today, with this lovely individual ivory merino leather interior. You've got the pan roof, and yes, this car might list at about £62,000 because it's a highly spec press car, but you can strip away a lot of that, and with BMW dealer contributions or discounts, you could pick one of these up nicely spec for about 55 grand. And let's face it, most people buy their cars on finance anyway, so I guess that would equate to about £599 a month with a couple of grand down, but don't quote me on that, and it's always changing. Okay, let's knock it into Sport Plus and over into manual and talk about its handling characteristics as we come down here. It's a brilliant little right left. There's something I need to tell you about this car, and I'm not entirely sure that the figures are completely accurate, but from what I can tell and from what I've read and researched, this M340d Touring weighs roughly 1950 kilos. That's a small person less than 2 tons. It's crazy. And what makes that more crazy is the fact that an equivalent M340i Touring is about 1760 kilos, so almost 200 kilos lighter. I mean, I might have got those figures slightly wrong. Now, I spent a lot of time trying to find the right ones, but there's so many contradicting ones online, so excuse me if I have, but I know for a fact that the diesel is a fair bit heavier than the petrol. And I know that diesel lumps tend to be heavier than equivalent petrol lumps, even if they're the same capacity. I know that. And I also know that this car has got the latest 48 volt mild hybrid system in it, which must weigh a chunk. I'm guessing that's the majority of the weight in this car. And maybe the weights that I've been reading for the M340i don't include the mild hybrid system that is being introduced into that model too. And after reading that, I did take this car out for a bit of a spirited drive to try and get my head around whether it really is 2 tons that we're playing with here. I mean, we're talking a car that weighs basically the same as my long wheelbase 7 Series that also has the 3-litre B57 engine in it. So, you know, really hard to get my head around. Okay, my 7 Series is rear wheel drive only, and when you do add up a lot of things, yes, it's a medium size touring or estate car. It has all-wheel drive. It has a fairly heavy gearbox. It has a heavy engine with lots of radiators and intercoolers. It has the hybrid system, but still 1950 kilos. I mean, that's just insane. And actually, you do start feeling that when you push the car hard. Now, I can't really do that today on a public road, especially in these sort of conditions with cyclists and stuff out. But I did do it on track, as we talked about right at the start of the video. And I must admit, although it did feel like a lot of mass, it controlled its weight very, very well. But I do fear, and sometimes when I do turn it into a nice dry corner, especially slower speed corners, you can feel that there's a lot of weight over the nose. I'm not saying it doesn't feel balanced, I'm not saying it doesn't handle like a BMW, but you can start to feel that weight, especially when you're aware of it. On the way down here today, it's about a 35 mile, 40 mile drive. I averaged 52 miles to the gallon. 52 miles to the gallon. When you think about that, especially after I've just told you that this car almost weighs 2 tons and has an X-Drive setup, so there's a lot of drivetrain loss. It's just amazing. I mean, you can't deny 52 miles to the gallon. You'd never get that with a B58. Yes, you'd probably have achieved almost 40 miles to the gallon with that engine, because it's still massively impressive, but that's a long way off 52 miles to the gallon. And I genuinely think that on a long jaunt at 70 miles an hour, you could achieve around 55 miles to the gallon with this car, which is just ludicrous. It really, really is. So yeah, if I could have any car in BMW's lineup at the moment as a daily, especially as a winter long-termer, it would be this M340d Touring. In terms of, is it actually better than an M340i Touring? No, it's not better. It doesn't have that sportiness, it doesn't have that Jekyll and Hyde, if you like, that the M340i does. An M340i would go to 8/10 and give you that enjoyment. It has less weight over the nose and therefore handles a little bit better, whereas this will go up to 7/10, but it does that 1 to 7/10 better than the M340i, so hopefully that makes a bit of sense. If you want to see more content on this M340d Touring, head over to the Yes Auto website and check out my video that I've done on this car. There'll be a link to that in the description below. This might be my last video before Christmas, so I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for such a fantastic year channel-wise. Thanks for the support. I know it's been a massively difficult and complicated year for so many. I've had my issues with my business, and unfortunately it's closing down next month, but I've been very fortunate to have YouTube to fall back on and work hard on, and I really hope for everyone's sake that 2021 is more like 2019 than 2020, because this year's just not been great. No matter which way you look at it, it really has not been the best year. And yeah, personally, I just want to see a lot more freedom, a lot more health and happiness for next year. So thanks a lot for watching. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you at the next video very soon. Cheers, guys.